This is the Behavioral View. I'm Shannon Hill, and joining me is Nissa Van Etten. We're your hosts for candid conversations about applied behavior analysis. No gimmicks, just real talk, practical tips, and maybe a few laughs. Come on and join us. Let's have some fun. Hey everyone, would you like to get at CEU for this episode? Listen closely for the announcement of 3 secret words delivered throughout the episode. Take note of those words, and we'll tell you where to go to get your CEU when the show is over. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Behavioral View. This is season 4, episode, what month is this? October, episode 10. And I'm Shannon Hill. I'm editor-in-chief at CentralReach Institute. I'm here with my always Behavioral View, Miss Earth. Want to say hi?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Nissa Van Etten, and I'm the director of, what's my title? Clinical Training and CR Institute here at CentralReach. Lots of words in that one.
And it might be a Friday. We might stumble words a little. It's okay. And we've been introducing you guys to a lot of the internal BCBAs who work at CentralReach this season. I almost said year, but I guess it's the same thing. And we have Jordan with us. Jordan, say hi. Tell us a little bit about your life as a BCBA and your life now at CentralReach.
Hi, I'm Jordan Fries. I'm a BCBA, and I've actually been at CentralReach for 3 years this month. And I used CentralReach as a practitioner before joining the team, and so experience on the field and practicing using CentralReach, and then loved it and wanted to come over and support customers using CentralReach. So enjoy having that connection still to the BCBA world.
Yeah, absolutely. And our special guest today, I'm sure everybody has already heard of at some point in life, Amber Valentino. Amber, you want to say hi and tell us a little bit about you and what you're doing now?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. My name's Amber Valentino, and I have a long history in the field of behavior analysis, but probably importantly and most recently, I joined Mind Color Autism as their chief clinical officer. And as we record this podcast, I am finishing up week 3 and just love it. Love the team, love what we're doing. So I'm excited to talk about research and talk about some supervision practices and some of the things that I've done in the past and hope to be doing in the future with Mind Color.
Absolutely. We're really, really, really excited. And Amber has a fairly fresh publication out that we're going to be kind of focusing our talk around. But in general, we're doing a deep dive on growing your supervisory skills. I guess it depends on where you went to school, which one you but we thought we would kick it off with our question of the day, which is a favorite tool or tip or habit or whatever that you use for staying organized.
First?
I will go first because I'm as I get older, I'm realizing I'm not going to be able to rely on my memory. And I'm worried that my memory is really good. I remember a lot of things. I don't have to write things down. If I write it down, I don't even ever look at it again. But I actually like writing things down to help me remember it too, even if I never look at it. So that kind of, I guess, is my tip now is write it down. Get used to starting to write things down more because if I don't write it down, maybe in the future, I might not remember it. So right now, writing it down, but also looking at trying to be a little bit more organized with planning a day ahead, just not necessarily too far in advance, but the next day sometimes is a little bit better for me. Interesting. Can I piggyback off of that? Yeah. Because I want to say there's like 20 years difference between me and it wouldn't be an episode of the Behavioral View if I didn't conversate. But I think 20 years ago, yes, I was like, I don't always need to write these things down, but the act of writing them down does reinforce that they will be there. It no longer matters. It's gone as soon as you write it down. And so I have found, did I find it? I think I did. I'm going to take full credit for this. An application called Notion. And we brought that. Our whole team is now using it. But the reason that I like it is so adaptable. You're not forced into seeing things or organizing things the way most applications require you to do it. basically, it looks like you're building your own web page. You can organize it any way you want. You can attach documents. I don't have to look for things. I just have to remember to go look at my Notion board now, which sometimes I fail to do, but I do. If I keep it up, it really, really helps a lot.
And it wouldn't be an episode of the Behavioral Deal if I didn't share too much information in terms of how I organize. So I have got 3 kids and 3 jobs and 3 dogs. It's a lot to manage. So we have a family calendar in the kitchen. I have a desktop calendar here. I use a Google Calendar for my husband and myself to organize, and I color code our children and their sports and activities. And then my own personal work I do on my desktop. Every evening before I go to bed, I look at my calendar for the next day to understand how am I going to prepare myself, who am I meeting. And then for my supervision, I do direct supervision via telehealth. I always like to look in advance, check the learning tree, evaluate, just to make sure I'm going into it prepared. But so I'm a little bit of a type A in this capacity. I've got calendars everywhere, and my mind sees in calendars. So if I check in with my husband, I'll say, don't you remember on Friday, October 11th at 3 o'clock? Time slot, we have this, and it's red. And my mind is it memorizes the visual of the calendar block.
I'm sure he loves that when you say.
And I set it to ding his phone, and then I send him a text as a reminder.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
So frustrating, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love the calendar view. I'm gonna start trying to think that way. For people who know me, they will kind of chuckle at this because I often talk about this resource. But a tip for me, a few years ago, I discovered Cal Newport, who is an author, and specifically his book, Deep Work. And he talks about a concept called time blocking, which a lot of people have heard of, but he gives sort of this modern twist on how you can use time blocking in your life. And so very similar to what you all are saying with that, write it down, prepare, have intention behind what you intend to accomplish, and put some parameters with time around those intentions. And so I've been using that system and his physical planner for many years now, and I can't highlight it enough. It helps you stay organized, helps you stay on track. It helps you conceptualize sort of step-by-step progress toward a bigger goal, which I really love. So.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it's great tips. We'll make sure and link references on there so that people who are interested can go and find that.
And everyone can get it for Christmas.
Yeah. You should start paying me royalties or something. Al, if you're out there.
Yeah.
My name's Amber.
Well, all of that will be useful for today's talk because we're going to launch in and because of the memory issues, I am flipping over and actually looking at the behavior analysis and practice article. The title, for those of you who haven't seen it yet, the development of a calculator for objectively evaluating supervisory behaviors in practice. So that is that's what landed in my LinkedIn feed one day. And I was like,
oh, good.
Chris.
I love that.
So just for people who maybe haven't seen the article yet, do you want to give a general overview of what you did and what you found and all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Luckily, sometimes titles of articles are not very descriptive. Luckily, this one is. It is what you think it would be by reading the title. But general overview, as many people who are familiar with supervision literature know, a lot of it has been conceptual, descriptive, discussion-based in nature. And I think people have been grappling with this idea of how do you get some objectivity to the supervision experience. And there were a few articles that relied on historical research before ours, but to my knowledge, ours is the first one that really said this is how you would write the specific behaviors you're interested in seeing in a supervision session and in the overall supervision experience, and that's how you would capture them with data. And so we went through a process that's described in the paper, and maybe we'll talk more in depth about later on, to really make sure we were capturing the things that we wanted to capture, things that were important to the organization at the time, that were important to us. And then we tested it with videos. So we created some mock supervision sessions that we felt like represented a variety of quality supervision based on our objective behaviors. And we saw, could people use the calculator and get relatively the same score in those 3 types of videos? And it turns out they could. And people were scoring it pretty consistently. And so we stopped the study there. There was a sort of, we kind of wanted to keep going and test it in the field and do a whole bunch of other things. But we also felt like that's going to be a multi-year project and that's okay and it's worthy. But like, this is very valuable and we need to get it out there. And so we did. We launched it after that video testing, and you'll read all about it in the paper.
Awesome. Well, in general, in a nutshell, when you're designing these videos, so I'm guessing I'm probably going to use the wrong words, but ideal supervision, okay supervision, it's supervision you don't want to engage in. How did you go about deciding what those scenarios would look like before you did the testing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we were a little bit more bold in our word choice. And actually, looking back, I don't love it, but it's out there now. I think we actually used high quality, moderate quality. But we're just putting it out there, guys. There's some low quality supervision that could happen in the world. But yeah, so prior to creating the video, we had already conceptualized, these are the behaviors that we see people who are really engaged in supervision and engaging what we would consider high quality supervision engage in. And we had done some brainstorming, refining, we had sent it out to outside experts to say, what do you think? And sort of added to it, iterated it, and did that, of course, years. This was not a short term. We had kind of done that. And then when we started the project, we really refined it and modified it. So we had a really good idea going into those videos, what would constitute those different categories. And so after that, it was just me sitting down writing a script for, let me think back to either a time when I was not a great supervisor or I had a not great supervision experience and try and reflect that in words. And I think I did. And then, on the opposite side, let me think of a time when I was in supervision that was really engaging and what I would consider high quality versus, when I was with somebody and try and capture them. So,
Yeah. Well, the part that I liked about that is what you just mentioned, when I didn't give a good, we're always wanting to be better. We know that we're we've been put in situations where we're not prepared or, being as in the field, you get pulled into being a supervisor. At the time, my first year I was a BCBA. So obviously my skills have changed so much throughout the years. So I like how you mentioned even going back, and I think this tool is also great for self-observation, of my own, because I want to be better and I don't always have somebody observing me, giving me feedback. And also part of the tool is asking for feedback from your supervisees too. And I think that is another good thing, not just providing good supervision to make sure that the supervisee is getting good supervision, but making sure that you're becoming a better supervisor. We're always going to be trying to improve and things like that. So that tool, I think the tool is really great for both parties. I love the objective nature of, looking at the scripts, what defines each of these levels, because I think we can leave with different perceptions, right? I could leave and think that was a fantastic session, or I was engaged. I was, and again, I'm via telehealth, so I'm not in the room with the person. So I've really got to work a little bit harder to build rapport and get the learner to respond to me virtually. And I may leave a session and think that it went well. This makes me think of even sending just a brief feedback survey from the team saying, hey, how did that session feel? Feel comfortable to say it was low quality. You weren't looking at me in the camera. These are great objective measures for someone to just be able to click and say, the next time you see me, Nessa, I would love for you to really be looking into the camera or really be using my name multiple times. Just a nice way for me to go into my next session even better prepared, versus having this overarching theme of what I perceived as the session.
And that's a really great point. And interestingly, I had been giving talks on supervision for many years prior to this project. And I would talk about some of these behaviors. I would talk about best practices. And I would talk about things like you just described, like making eye contact, not being distracted, smiling, matching the affect of your supervisee. And I would always see people in the audience nodding, like, this is something I agree with. And yes, we need more of this. But I think too often people are either engaged as a supervisor, and like you said, they're not aware that they're not engaging in best practice. They think they're doing a great job, normal, or a supervisee is experiencing bad supervision. We'll just use that word, not so great supervision, but they can't exactly tell you what it is that makes it a bad experience. And in our study, and what we tried to capture was, it's not this complicated, like, you're not describing this highly conceptual topic good enough. It's the things that are really a part of high quality human interaction, and what we would probably most likely classify as soft skills, right? You're engaged, you're listening, you're avoiding interruption, you're allowing the person to speak, you're following up when you said you were going to do something. You're on time. You actually show up to the meeting on time. And it's not that any one of those things is going to make or break, but when you put them all together, they do result in varying qualities of a supervision experience. And that's really what we try to capture in the calculator.
And I think for me, like, it reminds me of when I would work with students or clients and have self-monitoring, like a checklist to make sure, like in class, I'm, because for me, my facial expressions do whatever they want. Like when I'm thinking hard, I have RBI. I'm sorry. I had, and so, or when and I've gotten that feedback from my supervisors and things like that, but never somebody I'm supervising. And I'm like, so this is a good way of also reminding myself to, like, okay, if I'm avoiding, I'm thinking, not necessarily, and like maybe even just being upfront, like at the beginning of, this is how I typically portray these behaviors. I'm going to work on it, but like, this is not because of you. It's just my way of thinking. I like think off to the side, things like that. And I like it as like a self-monitoring thing. So like for me to, like, okay, make sure that I'm like pausing, listen, those kind of things as well.
Mm-hmm.
Let me pause us for just a second to do a secret word for our CEU seekers. And our first one is going to be Halloween. So we're really close to that. I don't know if you guys have trick-or-treaters near you, but I've been always asked to spell the word. So Halloween is Halloween. Halloween. But as both of you were speaking, I was having so many different kinds of thoughts. But when you say so much of it is soft skills, and Jordan's talking about turning it into a self-monitoring checklist, is that the majority of what it is? Or what kinds of barriers are preventing us? You've got everybody in the audience nodding their head. We don't really necessarily usually have to teach people to be facing the camera when you're on a Zoom, right? So what kinds of barriers are we finding that prevent us from just doing that without a tool?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a great question. So to answer the first part, I would say, yeah, a lot of what's in the calculator is probably what most people would classify as soft skills. So things like we've already spoken about: smiling, nodding, gesturing with agreement, asking questions, giving feedback, and then some of the not so great stuff like interrupting, frowning, modeling negativity, right? Like gossiping or saying something negative about a parent or, another employee or something like that. And so a lot of it is as well, like the logistics, right? Started on time. There's going to be cancellations, but let's try and not cancel every single week or 90% of the things we have scheduled. That's not a great idea. And then, gosh, what's preventing us? Prior to joining Mind Color recently, I was on this sort of 8-month hiatus I was consulting and I was working, but not in the traditional workforce. And I just read a ton. That was a goal for me. And I read, and I got really into what you asked about, which is sort of this distracted mentality, like how are we living in this society where we're so distracted? And I read a couple of really great books. I'll just throw them out there. And I'm not going to recall the authors perfectly right now, but I'll say the names of the books: How to Do Nothing, and hyper-focus are the two that come to mind. Maybe you've read those. But a lot of what they talk about in their books, and I'm simplifying it, is just distractions, right? We live in this world where we have notifications everywhere, right? They're coming up on our computer. They're on our phone. Our phone is right there. So we pick it up and we look at it. And that stuff is inevitable. It's not going away. People aren't taking it away. It's in our life. And it's up to us to really intentionally control those things. And I think a lot of that is what happens in supervision is like people just really struggle, much like they do in any scenario, to be where they are, to be present with the person they're with, listening, soaking it in, focused on the task at hand. And so when you have that dynamic and you have that big barrier of I am distracted, I think all the other stuff comes with it. Like I'm just not excited about this work or this experience and I'm, saying negative things. I'm frowning. I just got an email from somebody and it's negative and oh, I forgot I have this due. And you just get this sort of all over the board bad experience, right?
Feeling a little convicted. Yeah.
Definitely. I mean,
This is all very true. And as you're talking, I'm thinking back to some supervision times in my life when I've been behaving that way. And 100% it is, well, maybe not 100%. 90% of the time, that is exactly what it is. I do think that sometimes there's this percent of you're not aware of your own behavior. As Jordan was talking about with facial expressions, we're not walking around looking at ourselves in mirrors as we're interacting with people about difficult content. Yeah.
Okay. So no, it's very normal too. So like when people read this paper, they should never feel, oh my gosh, I do the terrible job. It's not meant to be that kind of paper. It's not, everywhere you go, people are distracted and the human mind just naturally does that. We need stimulation. We need novelty. And so there's nothing inherently wrong with anybody who does that or, actually the practice. But you're right. I think just being aware of it sometimes can really improve it by a significant amount. And okay, I'm aware. It's sort of like any kind of meditating or yoga practice. If you've ever done that, you bring your mind back. Your mind's going to wander. Okay. I just bring it back. I bring it back. And if you practice and you exercise that enough, it becomes more of a habit than something that you have to force yourself to do. And it'll become easier over time, right? For the record, I've been talking about this stuff for years and years and years, and I'm still not great at it. Like there are times I'm like, okay, Amber, get off LinkedIn. Like you're not where you need to be, right?
But I do it.
Right. I do it.
Do you think also for me as a supervisor, I feel like I need support from the organization or things like that to make sure I have time to have meaningful supervision. Like, because like you mentioned, I have a billable requirement. I have all of these other things. I have parents that are upset. Like I'm thinking about what's coming next. If I'm always doing that, I'm not going to have good supervision. So maybe I need some support from my organization. Like does that ever come up, Amber?
Yeah. And I think two things. I'll say, I absolutely think that you should be in an organization that supports an overall healthy approach to work and gives you a manageable caseload. Let's not even say caseload because we could be talking about any kind of job, right? Manageable expectations for work. Now, I will say manageable expectations for work sort of vary, right? There are some people that would say, XYZ is manageable, and other people would say, no way, that's not manageable. So I think it's a mix. I think it's absolutely getting in an organization that has supports, that asks reasonable things of you. But then on the other side, I do think there's a time management component that, you could be in an environment that has really, really low, let's say, billable hours and expectations, but you're still struggling with all of that because you don't have the personal systems in place to manage it. So it's a little bit of both, but I think people wanting to really engage in these quality supervision practices, that's a holistic approach to saying, okay, what's going on in my world that's contributing to this? And one of them might be that you're either not in the right environment or you have to maybe advocate a little bit more for what you need within that environment so that you can be more present and engage in the supervision best practices. And it's a great question.
I have so many thoughts on this topic. My mind has gone, it's like a mind map with like all the, it's like my first thought went to Taylor and colleagues' paper on compassionate care and the survey, that they did with parents, where the parents were like, BCBAs are experts, they're authoritarian, they come in distracted. If they're on the computer, are they even attending to me as the parent? Which, again, leading to the outcome of the learner is a major impact of these soft skills. And then I think about the role of the supervisee, so the RBT, apprentice, whatever you want to call them, and thinking that a lot of the individuals that listen to this podcast, are here for CEUs, and they have been in that role. And we can all remember the time when our BCBA whizzed in, they didn't have much time, and we weren't sure what they were doing, and maybe the feedback felt punitive. And I know you said this on the podcast. When I started in the field, this was way before the supervision was required by a BCBA. And my supervisor at the time, I was 17, so I was just in undergrad, freshman year, working with a little boy with autism. And every time I placed a demand, it was with a question. What do you want to do next? Should we get off the swing? Want to go have... And every time I asked a question, she would tap me on the head. I left my first in preschool session being tapped, or it felt like hitting after a while. I drove home a young girl, a young woman crying, just like, maybe I don't even know what I'm doing. I mean, and I love this woman. She was fantastic. She was a special ed teacher with a master's. This wasn't for, supervision in that capacity. It was for the learner. But I just remember that role of, wow, how would she like it if everything she did wrong, I was tapping her? And I think that's that empathy piece that we all have to bring into supervision. This person, whether or not they want to go and pursue a master's, they are human. And they are doing their absolute best to serve this little bitty or this adult learner. They may be brand new in the field, have no idea what this diagnosis is and what it looks like, which we know a lot of individuals who come into this field walk in the door and then they're out the door the next day because they didn't know that aggression and all behaviors occurred. Or this is an individual, again, that I know that Pat Feynman talks about, that circumstantial view. They come from a very different world and we don't know what they're going through. So there's this level of just, we have to really care about that 60-minute, however much time we're delivering to that person. I want to give you everything I've got, and I'm going to turn off my phone and throw my phone across the room because, again, I'm on my computer. I can't get up and get it. It's all the way over there. And if it goes off, I'm not going to grab it. It's too far away. But it takes years of really understanding if a person really wants you for that 1 hour. You can help them with that learner.
Yeah, it brings up a really good point, too, that I think it's very important to understand that you can be an effective supervisor and you can be kind, right? Because I think sometimes people look at those things completely differently. Either you're effective and you change your supervising behavior according to what you want to see. In this case, physical touching you, which I wouldn't recommend to anybody out there in the supervisor world that's not touching people. I think just that you can be effective and be kind. And we talk about this for those of you who work with the autistic population, we talk about it all the time with kids now. We're talking about humane practices, kindness, using the least restrictive intervention, positive reinforcement, first and foremost. Why are we talking about when the people we supervise, right? Like, you can't have that kind of environment with your population and then turn around and use a bunch of punishment procedures with your supervisees and on the side. It just, it doesn't.
90s, bro.
It does. It was the 90s. Yeah.
We're not sure this is hoping we're in the 90s.
It was okay in the 90s. It doesn't make any sense. And so I think it's bridging that gap of, we're doing this already and we're doing it in one application, but it absolutely applies to our work with our supervisees. And, I too, I'm sure everybody actually listening to the podcast could remember a time where, somebody used a punishment procedure and it worked, right? Like somebody yelling at me about using terminology the wrong way. It worked. I'll never say that word incorrectly again, ever in my life. It was an effective punisher. But man, did I feel terrible. I cried. And there's no reason when you have much kinder alternatives and you can easily shape behavior based on those more humane principles, ways to treat people. Yeah.
I do love that we're at this point that there is so much discussion about this now, because we've struggled so much with I don't know, choosing the correct topography of using a procedure or a principle in applied behavior analysis. So hopefully head tapping would never be seen as I can't help it, Nissa. My brain is still so stuck on that. Like, how do we get to the point where we're thinking, okay, we need to signal when this behavior is correct? Fine. I would.
Yeah. But I'm glad you shared it, though. So, I mean, a great example.
Yeah, it really is. At least it definitely lights that one up. Let me do another secret word very quickly while we're on a pause. Thanksgiving. THANKSGIVING. I don't know why. I think it's a part of my mental decline that I want to look at the word while I spell it. I am duty. Hopefully that was correct.
So I have a question. Well, so grad school, I think, again, like, how are we preparing our supervisors to be supervisors? Grad school focus a lot, ABA practices, things like that. I do, like, soft skills. Amber, do you have recommendations of any good resources, books to help practitioners? Things that I've gone through. One in grad school that I still remember had a is difficult conversations books, or how to influence people. Oh goodness, now I'm blanking. I had it in my head.
How to win friends and influence people. Yep.
Yeah. Are there any good resources that you feel that might be supportive for soft skills in our field, or just in general?
So yeah, I can recommend a couple of books. Before I do that, the first thing I would say is just don't underestimate the power of imitation. So as a supervisor yourself, especially if you're somebody who others look up to, which we oftentimes are just automatically in a supervisor role, just know that all of the people out there are like 3-4-year-olds in terms of they're going to imitate your behavior because they see it, and sometimes people will do it without even knowing it. So I still have mannerisms, intonation in my language from past supervisors, and I've been told before when I present, you sound just like insert the name there, and I am not consciously doing that. I just am imitating what I see. You can probably think about this. Hi, kitty cat. You can probably think about this in terms of leadership. I was sharing with somebody not long ago that I've been involved in an organization where there's a shift in leadership, and you can see the entire company's personality shift based on that leader, that CEO, right? If you have somebody who's very direct and, authoritarian and very kind of abrupt and interrupts, guess what? Everybody starts doing that. Now, did that leader ever say, do what I'm doing? No, not one time, but people just automatically imitate it, versus somebody who's a little softer, kind, gentler, listens. You'll see everybody imitate that. So first thing is, don't underestimate the power of modeling and people imitating you almost automatically or immediately. It's funny that you mentioned those two books, but yeah, I love Difficult Conversations, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And then also I would say, look out there for supervisory curricula. So I know that CASP has a great 8-hour one. I know that there are a couple of companies out there who have created, maybe CentralReach has one too. Yeah, you do.
Must be.
Those 8-hour ones, because I think what's nice about the more video-based tutorials is that you're seeing, you're hearing, as opposed to, reading a book, which is great. I love reading. But look out there, too. I think there's a lot more than there ever used to be, partially because it's required, but also people are really into this stuff. They want to teach it. They want to learn about it. So check out some of those things.
One of the things, and Amber, you and I kind of talked about this earlier in the pre-interview section of our time together. What I am currently working on a lot right now because we've had some requests from our organizations that we help them with actually developing ways to track and assess competencies, particularly in the RBTs. So we are currently building that product and developing all of these tools and assessments that just not out there. Some of them are, but for the most part, we're kind of taking the skill, doing our own component analysis and breaking down how would you track that. And because we started with that RBT task list, I have gotten to where I'm obsessed with something. And that obsession is that the RBT task list includes elements of receiving feedback from your supervisor. I don't see something similar for the BCBA level task list. We really do emphasize this hierarchical model of giving and receiving feedback in our field. We are making that change, as I said earlier. Thankfully, we are. We want to listen. We want to listen to the feedback that our supervisees are giving us, that our clients are giving us, that their other stakeholders are. But what does that do? Just that element that is emphasized in one area and not in the other. Big picture question for all of you. We will not put Amber on the spot to answer.
I can go first. I think, and I think there's this level of expectation on the RBT. They should be receiving feedback, that they should take it. This is a power dynamic, right? This is a person who has a higher position than me. They're getting paid more than me. I have to listen to what they have to say. And then without this requirement that BCBAs have to receive feedback and take it, again, has that struggle between I do have to listen, I can't question what my BCBA is saying. And I think that's is inaccurate. I mean, if you're asking for my personal opinion and my own experience in giving my supervisors feedback, we all have different ways that we learn in different styles. I think that being able to tell your supervisor, I prefer you to tell me the moment when it's happening versus can you follow up with an email or a message after, because I'm going to forget once I walk away from the session. I think there's a level of humanness that requires both the BCBA and the RBT in that relationship. And I think Amber's touched on this a lot. There's a lot of texts out there, a lot of books out there that really help, like I have it on my desk from a lot of work that I've been doing, the mentorship, supervisor and mentor role, right? That text is fantastic. Yeah. And the chapters are broken down so well to say, hey, supervisor, while you have this power dynamic, you're also a mentor. Maybe the title should just be mentor, because supervisor makes it feel like you have to do what that person says. When mentor is, they're shaping you and helping you, and you can kind of disregard some things. Now, when it comes to the behavior plan of the learner, you don't want to disregard that. You do have to implement with fidelity. But when it comes to professional behavior and emulating, what they look like, you can kind of take it and leave it as you see fit.
And I like kind of going back to that too, the sellers and the block, that work, and how, I've always was taught to say, do a survey or how do you like to get feedback, but it was never more than that. And it was never more okay, how do I like to get feedback? Or as a supervisor, I was always asking the supervisee, how do you like to get feedback or praise or things like that? And those are things that I think we're taught and so common, but not necessarily make sure that you're also giving me feedback and things like that. Yeah, I mean, my answer to my own question has to do with creating an environment where they feel comfortable, because that is so emphasized. You are receiving. I am the expert. You are receiving. I am the expert. And then when you try to turn that on its heels and say, but I want you to give me feedback, how do we make that or create the conditions where that is something we're actually going to get from them?
Well, another book I'll recommend that came to mind as you all were speaking is Radical Candor by Kim Scott. You've probably read it, but what's standing out in that book and that I really like is that she recommends that you push, maybe isn't the right word, but you push your supervisee or your team member to give you feedback. And if they just give you you're doing great, you dig. No, can you come up with something that I could work on? There's got to be something that I could work on. There's got to be something. But I think all too often we sort of check the box and say, well, I asked them and they said I was doing fine. And I like that. I got several things from that book, but that always stands out as don't settle for somebody just politely saying to you, you're great. But in order to do that, you also have to be okay with somebody giving you hard feedback and saying, you know what, you never pay attention to me. You are always distracted, and you have to sit with that, and you have to humanely respond and know that you asked for that. And not only do you have to be okay with it, but you have to change your behavior based on it, right? And so I think a really great exercise for any leader is just to get really comfortable with giving feedback. And you can do that organizationally. You can do those 360 evaluations, or you can just get really comfortable. People are going to be telling me things about my behavior all the time. Some of them are going to be great, and some of them are going to be areas of improvement. And I'm okay with that because I'm not perfect. And we teach people that. We teach somebody to be okay with receiving feedback. But you're right, on the flip side, we don't always model that ourselves. So we need to do both. And so in those situations where there's a clear power dynamic and the RBT may feel like I can't do it, I would be the supervisory thing. I really do want this. And so even if you have to spend the next 24 hours picking your brain and digging deep, please criticize me. Please find one thing that I can do better, and I will respond. And then at that point, I think you have gotten the behavior. You can apply the reinforcement contingency, and you can shape it. Like, right, the problem is a lot of times people just aren't engaging in the behavior in the first place, so you can't apply any kind of consequence. But as soon as you can get them to engage in the behavior, then okay, we can move it from there. And then months later, they're going to be like, "Hey, Amber, get off your phone, get off LinkedIn. I'm talking to you, girl."
All right, can we flip it then? Because there's also those RBTs that don't mind telling you, and
Oh, yeah.
it's tempting to not hear it because of the way the message is delivered. Do you guys have any self-disclosures that you can provide to help us learn how to suck it up and hear the part we need to hear without obsessing over the part we don't need to be obsessing over?
I have a couple. As a supervisor in person, I jump in. I mean, this is probably why I got in the field. I love kids. I love the responding. I just love the interaction. So many times in my years, I take over the session and I just start running it. And I've had a number of RBTs say, it's not helpful when you come in and take over because they're not responding and you're not able to give me feedback when I'm alone with them. So if you could stay back and be quiet. I had a number feel comfortable enough to stay back and be quiet. And with a couple learners, it did require some shifts because when I walked in, the learner would approach me and look for that type of interaction. And I'd have to kind of narrate to the RBT as I'm trying to break this because I want him to respond to you. It might take a couple sessions. But also just when the feedback comes, being very apologetic. I've also had apprentice-style individuals who are receiving hours say, you don't use enough technical jargon. I really want to learn in the moment what a limited hold is and what, this type of reinforcer is. So can you narrate with the jargon? So both types of feedback. Again, driving home, I'm thinking about it. I'm reflecting on it all. And then hopefully I'm implementing and changing that when I come into that next session. But we take criticism. And I think that a lot of us even in that 4-to-1 model, that one piece of feedback will just stick with me forever.
It's hard. It's hard. Well, those are two really great examples because my guess is from your perspective, you thought you were being exceptionally helpful by jumping in and by not using too much jargon. And it's just a great example of how perspective is meaningful and experience is meaningful, and that differs across everybody. And for those people, those things that you went into with great intentions, right? Like I think most people would look at those behaviors and say, that's great supervisory behavior, actually had the opposite effect. So it's a good lesson in not taking the thing at surface value and knowing that it's going to impact people differently. And there really does need to be this individualized approach to supervision and style based on what the learner needs, right?
You're reminding me of something that I had noticed. I had some ophthalmological issues going on.
That's the word, right?
We will not spell it.
That's the third code word. No, I'm just kidding. It's not. It's not. Don't do that. You won't get to see you.
I know. But anyway, I went through a series of doctors, as one would refer me to the next, and all of them. So this is definitely something going on in that world of training. All of them had an apprentice in there, and everything that they were doing, like they were in this stage of modeling and like doing paperwork in the background and all. but the ophthalmologists were narrating continuously every single thing that they do. And as the client in this case, I'm like, what's that word mean? He's hit it. Like, well, part of me was like, that's really cool training. The other part of me, as the client, was like, you're scaring the crap out of me when you said, try kids. I'm like, dying. So finding that bridge between being able to meet their needs without interfering with the session progress is, I would think.
That's actually a really cool next project idea. Thank you. Yeah. Maybe I'll do it. I don't know. We'll see. But just that idea of, I wonder if you could have a supervisor who would list like things that they think are effective and meaningful and good, and then have supervisees sort of like rank those, or I don't know, just something around that perception of what I think is best practice versus how people perceive it, and that supervisor-supervisee relationship. That'd be a cool project.
All right.
My supervisors in graduate school were Steve Ward and Terry Grimes. And I will tell you, Steve narrates everything. He can remember so many terms with the particular learner because of the narration as he was playing with her. I'm now delivering positive reinforcement in an FR5 schedule. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to provide this blocker because it's just this amazing level of, I would soak it in, and just that narration is really wonderful. And again, if it doesn't impact the learner.
Yeah, until they start, until they start like telling them, like they're doing it themselves. Like, okay, give me an FR forward. The client can start schedule. I want to go back to FR.
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay. Well, we're coming into the last little bit of time here. So I'll go ahead and do the last secret word, and then I want to close with some recommendations. So last secret word, I bet most people could guess what it's going to be. Valentine's Day. Valentine. Oh. Did I have to spell that one? VAL. Maybe Amber Valentino, could she?
Yeah, right? That's usually how I get people to know my name if they're not familiar with the designer. It's just Valentine with an O. And
I don't have enough money for that one.
You must be a analyst, don't.
Let's leave our listeners and viewers with some tool tips, I guess. So I'm really interested in upskilling my own supervisory repertoire. What do you recommend for me? Where do I start?
Yeah, I usually tell people that luckily the supervision literature in behavior analysis is consumable. So there are some areas that if you were to say to somebody, read the majority of the articles on this particular topic, it would take them years, or like it would just be an overwhelming task. But the supervision literature isn't really like that. And I don't think you have to read every article out there, but really, it wasn't until about 2016 you started to see people specifically talk about supervision. There was a special issue in behavior analysis in practice. And then it's sort of gone in waves. You'll see a big, batch of supervision articles, and then it'll slow for a little bit. And so, you could probably read about 20 articles over the course of that 2016 to present and become very knowledgeable on the topic. And I would actually recommend doing them a little bit in, chronological order, because it's kind of cool to see it evolve over time. And I would start there because I think behavioralists are doing a really good job talking about this stuff. I think people want to make it a part of their practice. They want to understand it more. They're excited about it. I mean, there's a reason that paper came across your LinkedIn feed. It's because it didn't go viral, but it had a lot of people saw it and said, yes, this is really meaningful. And so I would start reading. And the good thing is, too, also a lot of it's in BAP. So it's one journal, not all of it. There's obviously other journals that have supported the supervision literature. But primarily, if you've got a subscription to BAP, you're going to be able to find most of the stuff that you need. So that's my first go-to, is read the supervision literature in our field.
Hey, and I can tag on to that, because this is another one of these tools that I am just in love with right now. And Ellie Kazemi just posted about it too, and we all jumped on it. Notebook LM. A lot of that literature is available public domain, so you can feed it into Notebook LM, and it will not only make an audio version of a podcast to discuss it to you, but I think it keeps it kind of surface level when it does that. but it will organize it into briefs. It will create study guide for you with a lot of questions to be asking yourself as you're reading this. It is an amazing tool. So I know a lot of people are driving around in cars again. You could be getting this stuff played back to you as you ride.
Yeah, technology is amazing right now, right? Like, it's just incredible what you can do.
Or you can access the literature in so many different ways now than you used to be able to.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Don't forget your BACB resources allow you free access to this once you're out of grad school.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many times I have to remind people that you can go get that.
It's true.
All right. Any closing thoughts before we wind down?
This was really fun.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thank you. I love the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to thank you, Amber and Jordan, for joining us. Nissa, I always love time with you. But we will generate a little resource list. Amber threw out a lot of suggestions for us. And we will see you next time on the Behavioral View.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Behavioral View.